We live in a world where technology has been called the greatest disruptor of human happiness in history. Is this really true? Or can our happiness, can our health keep pace with the speed of innovation?
The truth is that every time we push happiness over the cognitive horizon, we've just moved the goalpost for what happiness looks like, right? So when we start out in life, your parents tell you need to get good grades. And once you get good grades, then you'll get into school. And once you get into school, well, then you need to get into graduate school or get a job. Once you get that job, you need a promotion. Once you get promotion, then you need to get a house with a picket fence and 2.5 kids, however that works. And so each time this happens, we keep saying, oh, I'll be happy when, I'll be happy when. But what we've discovered is that the formula for happiness is actually reversed. It's not, I'll be successful and then I'll be happy. The brain actually works in the opposite order, that when you're happy, you're then able to experience what we call the happiness advantage, meaning that your brain works better at positive than it does at negative, neutral, or stress. So when the brain is positive, it's actually able to see more possibilities and opportunities around you. In fact, specifically, a happy and engaged brain has 37% higher sales, 3 times greater creativity, 31% more productivity. You're 40% more likely to receive a promotion, 23% fewer fatigue symptoms in your life, you're 10 times higher engagement levels, 39% more likely to live to age 94, and 50% lower chance of heart disease. Wow, right? If these statistics are true, and they are because this is the research that's been coming out of positive psychology for the past 20 years, if these are true, why aren't we doing it? Why do we sometimes buy into the idea that being stressed and negative is actually helping us?
I noticed in the last 2 to 3 years, though, through my work, that the conversation really started to shift in the last 2 years. The conversation moved from uncertainty about the economic future to uncertainty about where we're heading in the digital future. The most prevailing concerns that I'm hearing for audiences are, will digital distraction cause me to lose sight of what's important in my life? Will robots take over my home and my workplace? How do I set positive technology boundaries for my kids? And will technology actually make us less happy? So for the work that you're doing where you're inventing and creating and researching, you see the value, you see the potential. I don't have to convince you that these fears are necessarily unfounded, but what I want you to do is to hear from the people that I'm talking to, this is where they're at, and here's how we're trying to work to move beyond it. My favorite wearable I tried out in this process was called the Spire Stone, and it's a small lava-shaped rock that clips onto your bra strap or your waistband, and it just measures your respiration levels, and it manages to give you feedback through an interface on your phone saying in real time how your breathing is doing. Is it making you more calm or focused or tense? And it'll vibrate if you start to feel tense to cause you to stop and think a little bit more. And so I was testing out the Spire for about 5 days. As a naturally anxious person, I found this feedback loop really useful because it helped me to just be more aware of my breath patterns. But about 5 days into testing it, it went from fascinating to fundamentally transformative. Because in that moment, what happened was last summer, my 8-year-old managed to break her neck in the swimming pool through some horseplay. And it was, she's fine now, fortunately. She's doing amazing and can do back handsprings all over the house again. But at the time, it was a really dramatic moment for me. I had the privilege of getting to be the one to take her to the hospital, and I was wearing the Spire Stone at the time. And the whole way to the hospital, the Spire Stone said I was surprisingly calm. And I think it was because maybe I was like in focus mode at that moment. I knew I had something to do, and I was just going to do it. And it was calm all the way through the doctor appointments, through the fitting for the massive neck brace that she was going to have to wear the whole summer. And it wasn't until I was leaving the hospital that the Spire Stone started to vibrate. And it said, "You're feeling tense." I was like, I know. I'm aware. Thank you for that. But what it did for me in that moment was raise my awareness to think about why I was feeling tense. And what I realized was that I was actually feeling tense about how other people were going to perceive me as the mother of a daughter with a broken neck, rather than being present for my daughter as she was contemplating her new reality of the summer, which was no swimming, no lacrosse, no gymnastics. And so what it helped me to do is within 30 seconds, it enabled me to mindfully pivot to move out of my self-absorption into being more of the mother that I wanted to be for my daughter. And it was an example for me of really technology at its finest, right? That's what we hope that technology will do, is to be able to provide important information to us to raise our consciousness levels. And I think that if we can move our technology and our awareness that there are existing technologies out there like this, that numbers of individuals will find greater value in quantified data, that it's not just information, but it's information for transformation. We live in a world now where we have so many distractions. Our inboxes are full to the brim. We receive so many different text messages. Netflix is continually uploading new episodes that we're supposed to keep up with. We have technology creeping into every crevice of our lives faster than we know what to do with it and what we can currently assimilate or even evaluate what this means for us. And so we try to live our best lives, but we find ourselves overwhelmed and frustrated. We find ourselves not able to figure out, what are we going to do with this technology? How does it impact our lives? And as I speak to audiences around the globe, what I've noticed is that there's this deep concern that's been echoed over and again. Where are we heading right now? Where do we want to be heading in the future? And when we think about this, there's some burning questions that continue to bubble up and emerge. The questions like, how can I be happy in the midst of all this distraction? How can I teach my kids positive boundaries in the middle of this technological world dominated by negativity? And how can I actually use technology to help me to become more happy, to have more meaning in my life? And so these three questions continue to resonate, and I want to address the three of them today, starting with, how can we actually be happy in the midst of all this distraction in our lives? A text message came through, a news alert, a calendar notification, the doorbell rang, and then my mom called, and at which point I just gave up trying to focus. I think sometimes we actually think that distraction is thrust upon us, but I actually think that sometimes we invite distraction into our lives. I think that sometimes we make ourselves the victims of distraction. Because when I ran my 5-minute experiment, I could have turned off my phone, and it would have eliminated 3 or 4 distractions to help me focus on writing my book, but I didn't. How many of you out there have been having a really important conversation with a friend or a colleague, and in the middle of this important conversation, a text message comes through, and in the middle of that, your flow of conversation is lost? This is something that happens to all of us these days, and it doesn't even surprise us anymore. We find that we are so overwhelmed with the amount of technology coming into our lives that these distractions seem normal in our lives. A recent phone survey actually studied how many people would pick up the phone in certain settings, and 50% of individuals said that they would pick up their cell phone in the middle of dinner, which doesn't surprise me. 50% said that they'd actually pick up their phone in the bathroom, and even worse, 1/3 said that they would pick up their cell phone during sex. Not okay. I mean, really. We find that distractions leave us feeling so desired, so needed, that it can become intoxicating and addictive. And instead, what we realize is that in the process of chasing after happiness with our technology, we wind up running right off the happiness cliff like Wile E. Coyote, and we splat to the bottom of a canyon before we realize that the ground has dropped out beneath us, and we're no longer feeling as happy as we thought we were. In the same way that a third prong on an electrical outlet helps to channel and focus our energy, so we need to tap into our third prong, which I define as a system of guiding beliefs and principles that help us decide when, where, why, and how we use technology in our lives. Now, this might mean for you, it might mean setting a rule in your family that during the dinner hour, you're going to set up a phone stack in the middle of the table, and the first person to reach to grab their cell phone loses dessert. Or maybe it means setting an intention when you wake up in the morning that the first thing you look at in the morning is not going to be your cell phone, which might be hard. Some other people that I know have actually had to set up visual reminders to help them control the impulse control and to help them be more the person that they want to be. My friend Raj Daniels runs a tech startup in Dallas called Open Time. And he decided that he was surrounded by technology so often, he needed a simple gut check to help him remember when he should be checking his phone. And so he set up and said when he thought about swiping to unlock his phone, he would look at his phone lock screen, and it said, towards my goals or away from my goals. And if he found that his intention for opening his phone was moving him away from his goals, he simply tucked the phone back in his pocket and proceeded with his day. Visual reminders like this are so important for helping ground us to our intentions, helping us to become the person that we want to be, and it makes it that much easier for us to turn off non-essential notifications when we connect why this matters to us and who we want to be and how we hope to get there.
But I want to show you in a quick example here that I call the mirror neuron experiment. Now we have to be pretty quick about this, so none of you have to participate in my experiment if you don't want to, but if you do, what I'd like for you to do is to partner up with someone in the audience. So everybody find a partner real quick. If you are sitting closest to this wall, I want you to be person number one, and if you're sitting closest to that wall, you're going to be person number 2. I know it's tricky with some of the seating arrangements. You can arm wrestle for who gets to be number 1. Okay, if you're person number 1, raise your hand for me. Excellent. Person number 2? Fabulous. That was not the experiment. We have to do this now because I did this a few months ago on Wall Street. It literally took them 5 minutes to figure out who number 1 was, which explains their leadership problem. So, person number 1, what I want you to do is to not get angry with person number 2 when they do to you what I'm about to ask them to do to you. Person number 1, get within striking distance of person number 2. I want you to turn and face each other. Actually, person number 1, what I want you to do is absolutely nothing. It should be very easy. I want you to sit there with no expression on your face, no fear, no frustration, no flinching. Hold as still as possible. Person number 2, I want you to look in person number 1's eyes. And I want you for the next 7 seconds to smile as warmly, deeply, and genuinely as you can into their eyes, looking up into their eyes for 7 seconds. Go. All right, stop. This group is terrible at this. How many of you successfully, person number 1, how many of you successfully did what I asked you to do and not smile? Nobody? Wow, that might be a record. So what's interesting about this research is that I know that you can control yourselves, right? It's the reason why you've been as successful as you are today. But for some reason, for 7 seconds, you can't hold it together for me. And what we're discovering through this experiment, it illustrates something really important about the human brain, and it's called the mirror neuron effect. Mirror, like you're looking in the mirror, neuron, like a tiny part of the brain. And what happens, just like in this adorable picture of the monkey and the man sticking his tongue out, is that when you see somebody do something in your visual cortex, your body wants to mirror it. So in my brain, it says, Amy, you're smiling, and I say, no, I'm not. And before I know it, my face is contorted into a smile when you're smiling at me. And I say, what happened there? But that's called the mirror neuron effect. And we discover with the mirror neuron effect that just as positivity spreads through a smile, in this, like it did in this room, so does stress and negativity. Stress and negativity can spread in a room in less than 2 minutes to more than 60% of the people in the room. We find that stress and negativity spreads like secondhand smoke, and you don't even have to be the person who's stressed to be causing that effect. So what we want to do with the stress in our environment is to find a way to buffer ourselves through wirelessly rippling out positive change. And it's something that we have to very intentionally practice. And the way that we practice this is what I call choosing positive habits.
So we know that these 5 habits, that journaling, gratitude, acts of kindness, meditation, and exercise are wonderful habits to start with. But we know that if I stand up here and give you all this information, it's not necessarily going to translate into transformation, right? My brother gave a talk at a private equity firm a few years ago. And in the middle of his talk, this one individual stood up and he said, yeah, I know that gratitudes are good for you and all, but you had to go to Harvard to learn that, seriously? And he sat back down. He must have been a Yaley or something, but What I think was interesting was that he's right. He's absolutely right. We all know that gratitude is good for us, right? It doesn't take an Ivy League degree to get to that. But what we don't know is how to get those habits to stick and how to begin to really inculcate them into our lives in a ways that creates a sustainable lifelong habit, because information doesn't necessarily translate to transformation. So my goal here today is to share with you some strategies for how you can sustain that change in your life. What's interesting is after that talk, the senior manager in the room came over to Sean and he said, "You remember that individual who stood up in the middle of your talk?" And Sean was like, "Yeah, I do." And he said, what's fascinating about that is that that particular individual is the most toxic person we have on staff. Everywhere he goes, it's like a rain cloud follows him. And it's awful because he's the smartest analyst I have, but he's toxic. Every team I put him on starts to perform lower. People even leave the organization because they don't want to have to work with him. So even though this fellow knew about gratitude, he clearly hadn't begun to embrace it in his life, which is a 180-degree shift on what we need to be learning in our lives to really begin to make this something that has all the positive benefits that we want to strive for. Now, if you're like me, sometimes I need an additional boost to help me stay with my habits, and I found this fabulous app called Happify that lets you track your habits over time. It helps you put in your habits, gives you a social support network if you want, and will continue to remind you, hey, have you kept up with your habits? So if you're looking for a free resource, I love that one to be able to start with. There are a number of apps out there that are meant for life logging or life hacking, where you can start to track your own behavior and see change over time. For those of us who are more analytic or who just like to see change, or even get like little awards or medals on your phone for doing a good job, there's a number of apps out there. There's Habit Tracker, Instant, Ad App. I can give you a whole long list of apps that you can try that are specifically used to measure behaviors and to track not just whether you did the behavior, how you felt about doing the behavior, whether it changed your sleep habits. So the idea is that these apps are shifting now from just tracking a behavior to correlating behaviors that can really provide insights that maybe Mondays you're feeling less happy because your commute is always longer because of X factor, so that you can then go back and kind of untangle or unravel why you might be more stressed on those days. I think that idea of tracking the micro decisions that we make in our day is one of the most effective and the biggest trends that's going to come out of the next 10 years in terms of happiness and wellness, because those technologies have never been available to us before, and now that they are, we have some new ways of understanding what's going on inside of ourselves as opposed to just looking on the outside observation. And I think it's going to be fun, it's going to be powerful, but it's also going to require a little bit more engagement on our part too. What's amazing to me and what's so beautiful about the digital era is that you don't have to have an engineering degree to create the next big advancement. You simply have to have an idea and a growth mindset towards technology, being able and willing to collaborate and learn and to do something, to actually do something with your idea. For instance, my family friend in Dallas, they have a daughter who's 7 years old, and she was born with something called symbrachydactyly, which means that on one hand, she was born with nubs instead of fingers. Never stopped this little girl from doing gymnastics. She can do cartwheels and monkey bars with the best of them. But until just recently, she started to develop some painful blisters on her wrists from trying to grip the monkey bars in unusual ways. And so I told her mom about a resource I'd read about online called Enable. And Enable is an organization, it's a global community of volunteers that helps other people learn how to 3D print prosthetic hands from scratch for just $30. You can do it at home. It's amazing. A week later, my friend calls me and she says, "Amy, you gotta get over here." I said, "Okay, I'm coming." Got to her house and she said, "My husband was so inspired by the Enable website. He spent all weekend in the Frisco library and he managed to print our daughter a hand and assembled it overnight. And I got to watch as his daughter put on the hand for the first time and grabbed a cup with this huge smile on her face." This is the story of one technology, one idea, spreading happiness through the use of technology. And it was amazing to me. It's the story of how one website led to a global community that inspired a father to go find a 3D printer to build a hand for his daughter. And it's a story I share with you today so that we can go on social media so that people understand the importance of looking up resources like this so that we can help make the world a better place. Because technology is a magnifier, and it's only as good as the connections that we make with it. We should be shapers of technology, not the other way around. Because the same technology that leads to bullying is the same technology that can now lend a helping hand. For all the frustration and the distractions and the dangers of the technological era, let's not lose sight of where we're going and where we want to be going in the future. Let's be part of the solution by mindfully choosing to use technology for its best and highest purposes. This is the future of happiness, and it's up to us to create it. Thank you so much.